As a church leader, one of the most exciting times is when a new person shows up to something that you've planned or to a Sunday service, and that's something worth celebrating. I know for me, as a volunteer in a church, I love it whenever we have a new person visit our small group. But when a new person comes, what is the actual process of how to make sure they have a great first experience? Well, that's exactly what this phase of the First Time Guest Marketing Hourglass speaks to. What does that process look like? What are some guiding principles that can help us build a plan? As we've talked to church leaders across the country, we've asked them, what is your first time guest marketing strategy? And a lot of times we got answers like, we're not sure that we actually have one, or we thought we had a plan, but it's not really working. And so we developed this First Time Guest Marketing Hourglass to give church leaders a template of how to make a first time guest marketing strategy. And so you can check out some of our other videos to see an overview of this hourglass, as well as practical next steps on the first phase and the first part of the greet phase. But we're now in the second part of the greet phase, which is all about having an amazing first time guest marketing strategy for their in-person visit. And this part is very key.
Yes, have you ever been somewhere for the first time and you maybe feel a little bit lost or a little out of place? It can be an uncomfortable experience where you're kind of like, I don't know where to go, I don't know who to talk to, and I don't know what to do next. And that's exactly what we don't want the first time guests at our church to feel like. And that's why this in-person pre-visit or the first time visit strategy is very important.
See, one of the most simple things that you can do to make someone feel welcomed on their first visit is assign a volunteer in your church to act as the host. Have someone, a volunteer, who is in charge of making sure that they bring in first-time guests and make sure that they're pointed in the right direction so they know exactly where to do. A lot of times within the busyness and the chaotic nature of a Sunday or an event, this kind of gets lost in the shuffle. But it's important for someone to be designated to seeking out first-time guests, welcoming them in, and making sure that they're sent off in the first way. So that's one of the first pillars of this part of the phase, is assigning a first-time guest host.
And during this host phase, when you're assigning volunteers to this position, you want it to be somebody that's pretty integrated into your church body at this point, because you need it to be somebody who can easily recognize this is a person's first time visiting our church and I need to go and make a connection with them. Now, once they come over to the host table and you're starting to have this conversation with them, you're starting to build this relationship, we need to make sure we don't just make this a transactional experience where we want to get your email, we want to get your contact, and we want to get you plugged in somewhere, and now you can go into the service and move on. We want this host to be really trained into how to build a personal relationship with anyone who might walk through the door. So as you guys as church leaders are thinking who could be the first person to become our host at our host table, or who could be a leadership team during our host table stand, be thinking of who's currently integrated into your church body that could be able to really recognize a first-time guest and to build a relationship with them.
Now, if your church is really effective in the meeting and the pre-visit greeting phase of this hourglass, then a lot of times you're gonna have someone fill out a form and say, I'm gonna come visit next Sunday. And so you'll know there will be some first-time guests coming. Now, on the flip side of that, there's also gonna be some people who just show up. And so you not only want to have a plan for people who have planned their visit, but you also want to have a plan for people who haven't registered for a visit. So you want to have a little bit of margin there to make sure that you're able to welcome in and greet both of those types of guests.
So let's talk about one of the strategies that you guys probably have seen around the church world a little bit now, and that's having a host give your first-time guest a welcome bag. So as you guys might think, okay, this is just a great gift for somebody to come over and get from your welcome table. Actually, there's a much deeper strategy behind it, because if you're training your church congregation to be able to recognize these first-time guests as they come in, this welcome bag can be a really good tool to help people do that. So if you go around your congregation, you're walking around, you're going into service, you're going to small group, you're walking to the bathroom, you might be seeing somebody carrying this like first-time guest welcome bag. Now this bag does not need to say, I'm new here, come talk to me, because that can be really intimidating. But it can just be a bag that maybe is branded to your church or just a normal gift bag. And then that will show people, hey, this person's new. Maybe I can go and build a relationship with them and be like-minded with them. If you see that they're a mom trying to find the kids area, go beside them and help them, guide them to what that process looks like to check their child in. It can be as simple as that, and that's little strategies we're wanting to kind of plug into your church.
The congregation training part of this phase is super, super important because a lot of the process can't be automated because it is so personable because we're building trust. And so training your church to notice those welcome bags, training the church to take the first step whenever they see someone with that bag, or training your church to look around and say, who looks confused? How can I go and point them towards the first time guest table? Another thing that you can train your church on is knowing what's a good question to ask and what's maybe not the best question to ask. You know, you might see someone who you think is a first time guest and you say, hey, is this your first time? And they might answer and say, no, actually I've been going here for 10 years. And then that's not necessarily a good look. Instead, the question you could train your church body to ask is, hey, how long have you been attending our church? And they might say 10 years. And then you say, wow, you've been here for so long. I've only been here for 2 years. But they also could say, oh, this is my first time actually. And to that you say, awesome, well, let's go to a first time guest welcome table. And so the congregation training is really important in this process.
And another strategy within our in-person visit, which you guys might be a little bit familiar with, is this print marketing or signage that's going to be out in your yard or out in your parking lot, helping people know where to park, or even that your church is coming through this entrance to come in and find the spot to then come into your congregation hall. And so a little bit about what we want to do with that printed material or these yard signs is to use all the space within your church parking lot that you have.
Signage is super important. A first-time guest is not going to know where to go. And so you want to make sure that you're clear on your directions and instructions, and think about the first-time visit starting at the edge of your property, not at the front door, and expand it into the parking lot and into the entrance points to your church. Now, finally, the last thing is make sure that you give every single first-time guest a clear next step. Now, the next step might just be, hey, we'd love to see you come back next Sunday. The next step might be, hey, we actually have this really cool event for your family coming up in a month. Would you like to register for that today? But the next step needs to be personalized, and it needs to meet them exactly where the first-time guest is. If you're not clear about the next step, or if the next step isn't appropriate for that person's season, then it's gonna feel confusing and it's not gonna be personal at all. And so the clear next step takes some strategy and planning on your end to make sure that it's being communicated clear and consistent all throughout the visit and the visit follow-up.
Yes, so that kind of covers our entire phase 2, which is our greet phase. That goes through the pre-visit phase and the in-person phase. We talked about the pre-visit phase in a previous video. You can find that in the description to learn more about it. And then next we have our repeat phase. And so this is what we're going to be covering in our next video. So if you want more information, stay tuned for that really soon.